At Christmas dinner in Savannah, 29-year-old Claire Bennett finally hears what had always been implied. "You'll never belong," her stepmother says, voice sharp with finality. But before Claire can walk away, her father opens a deposit box left behind by her late mother, revealing a truth that no one at the table was ready for. Some legacies aren't written in wills. They're discovered in silence and claimed with quiet strength. Subscribe to the channel to follow Claire's quiet journey of truth, legacy, and silent strength. What she found inside that deposit box changed everything. The next chapter is just beginning. Chapter 1. The Ornament. The Georgian-style mansion on Abercorn Street stood adorned with pristine white lights, a picture-perfect silhouette against Savannah's indigo December sky. Claire Bennett sat in her rental car, knuckles white against the steering wheel, watching her breath form small clouds in the chilly air. The familiar knot in her stomach tightened as she stared at the house she had never truly called home. At 29, Claire had made something of herself in Boston, a respected curator at a small but prestigious art gallery, with her own apartment overlooking the Charles River. Yet here, in the shadow of her father's success, she still felt like the awkward 12-year-old who had arrived on his doorstep after her grandmother's funeral, clutching a suitcase and a faded photograph of her mother. The porch light flickered on, and Claire caught a glimpse of her father's silhouette in the beveled glass of the front door. With a deep breath that smelled of cinnamon and pine, the sense that had always defined Savannah Christmases for her, she grabbed the carefully wrapped gifts from the passenger seat and stepped out into the cold. "There she is!" Charles Bennett's voice boomed across the front yard as he descended the steps, arms outstretched. His silver hair gleamed under the porch light, his smile wide but not quite reaching his eyes. I forced a smile, allowing myself to be enveloped in her father's embrace. He smelled of expensive cologne and bourbon, the scent of a man who built an empire in commercial real estate, but never quite figured out how to build a relationship with his only daughter. "Traffic was worse than I expected," she lied, having actually spent an extra hour circling the historic district, gathering courage. "The house looks beautiful." "All Meredith's doing," Charles replied, guiding her up the steps. "She's been planning this dinner for weeks. Everyone's already here. The twins brought their new girlfriends, and Meredith's sister flew in from Chicago." I nodded, my stomach sinking further. The twins, her half-brothers, Jason and Michael, both 22 and golden boys of Samantha society, had always viewed her as an interloper, a strange northern transplant who didn't belong in their southern dynasty. The foyer of the Bennett home glittered with tasteful Christmas decorations. A 12-foot Fraser fir dominated the entrance, dripping with crystal ornaments and gold ribbon. The air was heavy with the scent of roasting turkey and Meredith's signature pecan pie. "Claire, finally!" Meredith's voice cut through the holiday music playing softly in the background. At 52, she remained striking. Her blonde hair perfectly styled, her figure maintained by relentless Pilates sessions and carefully monitored portions. She air-kissed Claire's cheeks, her smile tight. "We were about to start without you." "Sorry, I'm late," Claire murmured, handing over a bottle of wine she had carefully selected. "Merry Christmas, Meredith." She examined the label with a practiced eye. "How thoughtful. We'll add it to the collection." The bottle disappeared, destined never to be opened. The dining room was a showcase of Southern elegance. The antique mahogany table extended to seat 12, gleaming silver candelabras casting a warm glow over fine china and crystal. Claire quickly identified her seat, the furthest from her father at the head of the table, wedged between Jason's girlfriend, whose name she hadn't caught, and Meredith's terse sister, Evelyn. Conversation flowed around her like water around a stone. The twins boasted about their final year at Vanderbilt. Meredith detailed her latest triumph as chair of the Savannah Historic Foundation's annual gala, and Charles occasionally interjected with anecdotes about a new development project along the riverfront. It was during the main course, a perfectly roasted turkey with all the traditional sides, that Meredith turned her attention to Claire. "So," she said, cutting her meat with precision,
Your father mentioned you're still at that little gallery in Boston. Any prospects for advancement or perhaps a change of scenery? The question dangled in the air, laden with implication. Claire took a sip of water, buying time. The gallery is doing well. We just secured an exhibition of emerging Southern artists for the spring. How nice, Meredith replied, her tone suggesting it was anything but. Though I can't imagine the pay is substantial. Charles always hoped you'd join the family business, didn't you, dear? Charles looked up, seemingly caught off guard. Well, property development isn't for everyone, but there's always a place for you, Claire, if you wanted it. The offer rang hollow. Claire had heard it before, always public, always performative, never followed by any concrete discussion. I appreciate that, Dad, but I love what I do. Of course you do, but family businesses are about legacy, about belonging. She set down her fork, her gaze fixed on Claire. Though I suppose it's different when you've always been on the periphery. The table fell silent. Even the twins stopped their side conversation to watch. Meredith, Charles warned softly.
What? It's Christmas. If we can't be honest at Christmas, when can we be? Meredith's smile remained fixed, her eyes cold. Claire comes and goes. She's never fully integrated into the family, has she? Always keeping one foot out the door. Claire's throat tightened. I've tried. Have you? Meredith challenged. You visit twice a year, maximum. You don't call your brothers. You barely know your niece. You're like a ghost that passes through. That's not fair, Claire managed, though her voice trembled slightly. Life isn't fair, dear. Meredith's voice softened, which somehow made it worse. I'm just saying what everyone thinks. You'll never belong here, not truly. You're a guest, not family. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter traveled around the table. Not cruel, but indifferent, the kind that cuts deeper than shouting ever could. Claire placed her napkin beside her plate and stood, her chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. Excuse me for a moment. She made it to the powder room off the foyer before the tears came, hot and unwelcome. 17 years of Christmas dinners, 17 years of trying to carve out a space in a family that had formed without her, sealed tight against intruders. After composing herself, Claire returned to the dining room, prepared to make her excuses and leave. She would drive back to her hotel, check out early, and catch the first flight to Boston in the morning. This would be the last Christmas she spent trying to belong where she clearly wasn't wanted. But as she re-entered, Charles was standing, tapping his crystal glass with a silver spoon. Before dessert, I have something important to address. His voice was uncharacteristically solemn. Claire, please sit down. Reluctantly, Claire returned to her seat, avoiding Meredith's gaze. Charles reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet envelope, deep burgundy with gold trim. Claire, your mother left something behind, something I should have given you years ago. I think, he hesitated, glancing at Meredith, I think tonight has shown me that I've waited far too long. Claire stared at the small envelope, her mother's name, Margaret Bennett, embossed in faded gold on the front. A part of her past she had never expected to hold. Open it tomorrow, Charles said quietly. I'll have my assistant set up the appointment at the bank. Claire looked up at her father, searching his face for answers, but found only regret and something that might have been hope. Thank you, she whispered, clutching the envelope like a lifeline. As Charles returned to his seat, Claire felt the weight of every gaze in the room. For the first time since she'd arrived, she didn't feel invisible. And for the first time in 17 years of Christmas dinners, she didn't feel like leaving. If you're captivated by Claire's story and want to discover what life-changing secrets await her in that deposit box, make sure to subscribe to our channel right now. Hit that notification bell too, so you won't miss Chapter 2, where Claire uncovers a truth that will shake the Bennett family to its core.
Your subscription helps us bring more compelling stories like this one to life. Chapter 2. The Deposit Box. Morning light filtered through the Spanish moss that draped the oak trees outside First Coastal Bank, casting dappled shadows across the marble floor of the lobby. Claire sat rigidly in a leather chair, the velvet envelope clutched in her hand, watching the second hand tick methodically around the face of an ornate grandfather clock. She hadn't slept. After the bombshell at dinner, she'd retreated to her hotel room and spent the night staring at the envelope, turning it over and over in her hands, afraid to open it yet, unable to set it aside. What could her mother, a woman who had died when Claire was just 4 years old, have left that was so important? And why had her father kept it from her for 25 years? Ms. Bennet, a woman in a charcoal suit approached, her heels clicking against the marble. I'm Veronica Tate, head of private client services. Your father called ahead. If you'll follow me? Claire nodded, rising to follow the woman down a hushed corridor to a room marked private viewing. Inside, the walls were lined with dark wood paneling, a single table centered beneath a discreet chandelier. I'll need to see some identification, and the key, of course. Claire handed over her driver's license and carefully opened the velvet envelope. Inside was a small brass key attached to a numbered tag, 1247. Veronica examined both, then nodded. Everything seems to be in order. This box has been with us for quite some time. There's an annual fee which has been paid from a trust account. Would you like me to give you some privacy once I retrieve it? Yes, please, Claire replied, her mouth suddenly dry. Veronica disappeared through a heavy door at the back of the room, returning minutes later with a polished wooden box about the size of a large book. She placed it on the table, demonstrated how to use the key, and quietly excused herself. For several long moments, Claire simply stared at the box. It was beautifully crafted, with her mother's initials M.E.B., Margaret Elizabeth Bennet, inlaid in mother of pearl on the lid. With trembling fingers, she inserted the key and turned it. The lid opened silently on well-oiled hinges. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded blue velvet, lay several items: a leather-bound journal with a cracked spine, a small stack of photographs, a velvet jeweler's pouch, and a sealed envelope with "For Claire" written in elegant script. Claire reached for the envelope first, breaking the seal with care. Inside was a single sheet of creamy stationery, covered in the same flowing handwriting. My dearest Claire, if you're reading this, I'm no longer with you, and you've grown into the woman I always knew you would become. There's so much I wish I could have told you in person, so many moments I wish we could have shared. But life, as I've learned, rarely follows our carefully laid plans. The journal contains the story I never got to tell, how I met your father, the dreams we shared, and the truth about my family. The truth that Charles may have tried to shield you from, perhaps with good intentions. The photographs are of my parents, your grandparents, and the house on Tybee Island where I grew up, the house that should have been your birthright. The jewelry belonged to my mother. It's not just a family heirloom, but a key to understanding where you come from and who you are meant to be. I don't know what your life has been like without me, my sweet girl, but I hope you've been loved. I hope you've been cherished. And more than anything, I hope you know that you belong in this world in ways that are entirely your own making. All my love, always, Mom. Tears blurred Claire's vision as she set the letter aside. With reverent hands, she opened the journal, finding page after page filled with her mother's thoughts, hopes, and memories. She flipped through slowly until a name caught her eye: Sullivan House. Charles doesn't understand why I can't just sell Sullivan House. He says it's a money pit, that we could use the funds for our new life together. But how do I explain that the house isn't just property? It's the last connection to a family legacy that goes back 5 generations, the last piece of who I am. My great-grandfather built that house with the fortune he made in shipping. Every Bennett woman since has added her touch to it. It's more than wood and stone. It's our story. And someday, it will be Claire's story too. Claire's breath caught. She turned to the photographs, finding images of a stunning Victorian home perched on a bluff overlooking the ocean. In one photo, a much younger, smiling Margaret stood on a wraparound porch, her hand resting on an ornate railing, the sea stretching endlessly behind her. With shaking hands, she opened the velvet pouch. Inside was an antique emerald ring, the deep green stone surrounded by tiny diamonds set in platinum that had developed a rich patina with age. Along with it was a delicate key on a silver chain, ornate and clearly old, with an S monogrammed into its bow. The final item in the box was a thick legal document. Claire unfolded it carefully, scanning the formal language until she reached the critical passage. Hereby bequeath Sullivan House, located at 1847 Ocean Boulevard, Tybee Island, Georgia, along with all its contents and the sum held in trust at First Coastal Bank, account number 74-392186, to my daughter Claire Elizabeth Bennett, to be transferred to her upon her 25th birthday or at such time as my husband, Charles William Bennett, deems appropriate. At the bottom of the page was a sticky note in her father's handwriting. Meeting with Sullivan House caretaker arranged for tomorrow, 11 a.m., address and contacts attached. Dad.
Claire sat back, her mind reeling. Not only had her mother left her a house, a family legacy, but there was also a trust fund she'd known nothing about, and her father had already arranged for her to see it, as if he'd anticipated her discovery would change everything. As the implications washed over her, Claire felt something shift inside her chest. The ache of not belonging, the pain that had followed her from her grandmother's modest home in Boston to her father's mansion in Savannah, began to transform into something else, something that felt curiously like roots taking hold. She carefully returned everything to the box except for the emerald ring, which she slipped onto her right hand. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. When Veronica returned, Claire had composed herself, though her eyes remained bright with unshed tears. "Is there anything else you need, Miss Bennett?" Veronica asked. Claire considered the question, feeling the weight of the ring on her finger, the key to Sullivan House clutched in her palm. "Yes," she said, her voice stronger than it had been in years. "I'd like information about the trust account mentioned in my mother's will, account number 74392186. Veronica nodded. "Of course. If you'll come with me, we can discuss that in my office." As they walked back through the bank's hushed corridors, Claire felt as though she were moving through a dream. Yesterday, she had been the unwanted stepchild, the perpetual outsider. Today, she was Margaret Bennett's daughter, the inheritor of a legacy she hadn't known existed. And tomorrow, she would see Sullivan House, the home that should have been hers all along. Chapter 3. Sullivan House. The narrow road to Tybee Island stretched before Claire like a ribbon of possibility, marsh grasses swaying on either side under a crisp blue sky. Her rental car hummed beneath her, the emerald ring catching the winter sunlight as she gripped the steering wheel, the Sullivan House key hanging from a chain around her neck. The meeting with Veronica Tate had revealed staggering information. The trust account contained just over $4 million, accumulated over decades from family investments and carefully managed by the bank's trust department. The annual fees for maintaining the deposit box and Sullivan House had barely made a dent in the interest. $4 million, a historic home, a family legacy, all kept from her, hidden behind her father's silence and Meredith's carefully constructed walls. Claire's phone buzzed with another text from Charles. Since she had left the bank yesterday, he'd sent several messages, explanations, apologies, requests to talk. She'd responded only once, confirming she would meet the caretaker at Sullivan House.
The rest required a conversation she wasn't ready to have.
As she crossed the bridge onto Tybee Island, the ocean came into view, winter sunlight dancing across the steel-gray waves. Claire followed the GPS directions until she turned onto Ocean Boulevard, the houses growing more impressive with each passing minute. And then she saw it. Sullivan House stood on a bluff overlooking the Atlantic, its weathered gray clapboard and white trim gleaming against the sky. 3 stories of Victorian splendor, with a wraparound porch, ornate gingerbread trim, and a widow's walk atop the highest peak. Even from the road, Claire could see it was in surprisingly good condition, not the neglected money pit her mother's journal had suggested Charles believed it to be. A blue pickup truck was parked in the circular drive. As Claire pulled in beside it, a man emerged from the front porch. Tall, broad-shouldered, with salt and pepper hair and deeply tanned skin that spoke of years in the coastal sun. "Miss Bennett?" he called as she stepped from her car. "I'm Jim Sullivan. No relation to the house, far as I know." His smile was warm, his handshake firm. "I've been caretaking this place for near 30 years now. Your daddy hired me right after your mama passed." Claire blinked in surprise. "My father hired you? To maintain the house?" Jim nodded, gesturing for her to follow him up the porch steps. "Every month, like clockwork, the payment comes. Instructions were clear. Keep the house in good repair, ready to be lived in. No one's stayed here since your mother's visit stopped, but I've honored the agreement." He pulled out a ring of keys. "Though I suspect this old girl will be happy to have a Bennett woman back inside her walls." As Jim unlocked the door, Claire fingered the key around her neck. "I have a key, too." Jim's eyes crinkled at the corners. "That there's the ceremonial key. Been passed down through the generations. The actual locks were updated for insurance purposes years ago, but tradition matters in a house like this." He pushed the door open. "After you, Miss Bennett." Claire stepped across the threshold and felt as though she'd walked through time. The foyer opened to a grand staircase, its banister gleaming with polish. To the right, a formal parlor with furniture draped in white sheets. To the left, what appeared to be a library, walls lined with glass-fronted bookcases. "Everything's been preserved just as your mother left it. Sheets to protect from dust, but nothing's been removed. Even the family photographs are still in their frames, though I take them down and clean the glass every spring." Claire followed him in a daze, trailing her fingers along wainscoting and door frames, peering into rooms that somehow felt both foreign and familiar. The dining room with its long mahogany table, the morning room overlooking the garden, the kitchen, updated sometime in the 1990s, but still retaining its historic charm, with a massive hearth and hanging copper pots. "Would you like to see upstairs?" Claire nodded, unable to find words as emotion clogged her throat. The second floor held 5 bedrooms, each with its own character. The master suite faced the ocean, with French doors opening onto a private balcony. A smaller room next to it had been set up as a nursery, frozen in time with a white crib and rocking chair. "Your room," Jim said softly. "Your mama had it ready before you were born. Used to bring you here summers, till she got sick." Claire approached the crib, finding a stuffed rabbit inside, worn with age and love. She picked it up, a flash of memory tugging at her consciousness, the feel of soft fur against her cheek, the sound of waves through an open window, her mother's voice singing softly in the darkness. I remember this place." The third floor held 2 more bedrooms and access to the Widow's Walk, a small platform at the highest point of the house, offering panoramic views of the island and the endless Atlantic beyond. "Your great-great-grandmother used to watch for her husband's ships from up there," Jim explained as they climbed the narrow stairs. "Family legend says she never gave up hope even after his vessel was reported lost at sea.
stood up there every day for 3 years until he finally returned. The widow's walk was smaller than Claire had imagined, just enough space for a person to stand and face the horizon. The December wind whipped at her hair as she gazed out at the ocean, feeling a connection to the generations of Bennett women who had stood in this same spot, looking out at the same eternal sea. "Why didn't he tell me?" she asked, not turning from the view. "Why keep this from me for so long?" Jim leaned against the railing beside her. "Not my place to speak for your daddy, but I will say this. Grief does strange things to a person. After your mama died, Mr. Bennett couldn't bear to come here. Too many memories, I expect. Maybe he thought it would be easier for you not to know what you lost." Claire shook her head. It wasn't his decision to make. "No," Jim agreed quietly. "It wasn't." They descended in silence, completing the tour in the library where Jim showed her the house's original blueprints, carefully preserved in a large portfolio. "These might interest you," he said, pulling a leather album from one of the bookshelves. "Your family history goes back to the first Sullivan who built this place in 1868. Claire accepted the album with reverent hands, opening it to find page after page of faded photographs, newspaper clippings, and handwritten notes, a documented lineage of the women who had lived in and loved Sullivan House. "There's something else you should see," Jim said, moving to a portrait above the fireplace. It was covered with a sheet, which he carefully removed, to reveal a painting of a woman who could have been Claire herself. The same high cheekbones, the same determined set to her jaw, the same thoughtful eyes. "Your mother," Jim said, unnecessarily. "She commissioned it the year before she died. Wanted you to have it someday."
Claire stared at her mother's face, so familiar from the few photographs she'd treasured, yet somehow more alive here, captured in oils by an artist who had seen her essence. Around her neck gleamed the same emerald ring that now adorned Claire's hand. "Thank you," she managed, "for showing me, for taking care of this place." Jim nodded. "It's been an honor. I'll leave you to explore on your own now, if that suits. Take all the time you need. House keys are on the hall table, and my number's there too, if you need anything." He headed for the door, then paused. "Oh, nearly forgot. There's a letter for you in the master bedroom. Top drawer of the nightstand. Your daddy left it last time he visited." "My father has been here?" Claire asked, surprised. "Once a year," Jim confirmed. "December 18th, your mama's birthday. Never stays long, just walks through, makes sure everything's in order, leaves a fresh letter in that drawer." With a respectful nod, he departed, leaving Claire alone in the house that had always been hers. For hours, she wandered from room to room, removing sheets to discover furniture that told the story of changing eras and consistent taste. She found her mother's clothes still hanging in closets, her books on shelves, her collection of seashells displayed on windowsills. In the master bedroom, she opened the nightstand drawer and found a stack of envelopes, 17 in all, one for each year since her mother's death, each addressed simply to Claire. With trembling hands, she opened the most recent one, dated just weeks ago. "Claire, if you're reading this, you've finally discovered Sullivan House and the legacy your mother wanted for you. I have no excuse for keeping this from you for so long, only a flawed explanation. After Margaret died, I couldn't bear to face this house or the dreams we'd shared for our life here. I convinced myself I was protecting you from the same pain. In reality, I was protecting myself. Meredith never knew about Sullivan House or the trust. That was wrong of me too. Another secret kept out of fear and misplaced guilt. By the time I realized my mistake, it seemed too late to undo it without destroying the family I'd built. I visited every year on your mother's birthday, leaving these letters in hopes that someday you would find them. Each contains something I should have told you in person. Memories of your mother, stories of your early years together,
the truth about your place in this world. Sullivan House is yours, as it should have been from the beginning. The trust will provide for its upkeep and for you, should you choose to accept it. No strings attached, no expectations, only what has always rightfully belonged to you. I don't expect forgiveness, but I do hope for understanding, and perhaps, someday, a chance to know the remarkable woman you've become, not as an outsider in my home, but as Margaret Bennett's daughter, carrying forward a legacy far richer than anything I could have given you. With regret, with hope, and with love, Dad.
Claire sat on the edge of the bed, tears streaming down her face as pieces of her life rearranged themselves into a new pattern, not unwanted, but protected too fiercely and misguidedly. Not an outsider, but the inheritor of a legacy that stretched back generations. As twilight gathered, she made her way to the widow's walk once more. The ocean stretched dark and limitless before her, stars beginning to emerge in the deepening blue above. From her pocket, she took her phone and found her father's number. "Claire?" Charles answered on the first ring, his voice anxious. "Are you all right?" "I'm at Sullivan House," she said quietly. "I've read your letters, well, the most recent one. I'll need time for the others." "Of course," he replied. "Take all the time you need." A pause stretched between them, filled with 17 years of misunderstanding. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet," Claire said finally, "but I think I understand, and I'd like to try, to start over, somehow." She heard him exhale, a shaky sound that might have been relief or might have been tears. "That's more than I deserve." "Maybe," Claire agreed, "but it's what Mom would have wanted, for both of us." After they disconnected, Claire remained on the widow's walk watching as lights began to twinkle along the shoreline. For the first time in her adult life, she felt the certainty of belonging, not to her father's family, but to this house, to the line of Bennett women who had loved it, to a history that had been waiting patiently for her to claim it. Tomorrow would bring complications, conversations with her father, decisions about her job in Boston, and what to do with Sullivan House. Perhaps even a confrontation with Meredith, whose casual cruelty had inadvertently led Claire to this moment of discovery. But tonight, with the emerald ring on her finger and the key to Sullivan House around her neck, Claire Bennett stood where generations of her family had stood before, facing the endless possibility of the horizon. And for the first time in as long as she could remember, she was exactly where she belonged. If this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to our channel right now to join our community of storytellers and story lovers. Your subscription is what makes it possible for us to continue creating these emotional journeys that remind us all of the power of family, legacy, and finding our true place in the world. Hit that notification bell too, so you'll be the first to know when our next captivating story drops. And don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. Did Claire's journey resonate with you? What would you do with a surprise inheritance and family legacy? Your story matters too.